bats are bred for one purpose.
What?
For war.
Greetings, ladies and laddies, and welcome back to the realms of this cursed city. In today's episode, we'll paint the 6 swarms of bats, some of the minor foes you might encounter on a stroll through the city's streets. This time I was actually quite frustrated before starting on these bats, as I didn't want to go for the dark color scheme by Games Workshop, but I had no idea of what colors we should go with instead. Mysterious objects? No problem, easy choice. Little pests? Also quite straightforward. Rats? We all have seen Ratatouille, no further questions. But bats? No idea. It was when I looked into the Daughters of Cain battle tome that I finally got some inspiration on how to approach these guys in a few very interesting ways. And with that, we can jump right in. Starting with the base coats, I took a Bordeaux Red for the first bunch of swarms. When doing this, we can be very quick and messy, but should always double check to catch every last bit of their bodies and wings, as it is very easy to miss some spots on the fly. For the second batch, I wanted to use a cold purple. You can use normal paint, or do it like me and use paint that's been to hell, quite fitting the devilish nature of these beasts. I got immediately sick of my wrecked purple though, and ditched it for a lighter, almost pink paint, purely because of its better consistency. We'll come to the dire bats in a bit, but for now we can already paint their little companions in the respective colors of the other bats, to intertwine them with the rest of the swarm. After the bats themselves are fully painted, we can move on with their terrain. To provide a bit more variety, we'll go with a dark beige, again aiming for a sandstone appearance, and a very blue tinted grey for the look of cold stone. For the pillars of the dire bats, I went with a very bright grey, to try and go for the look of the stone seen in the ruins of Vargskyr. Moving on to the other accessories, we'll use a brighter beige for the skull embedded between 2 of the pillars, and a pale brown for the roots twisting themselves around it. For the candles, I decided to go with a bright white, but you can of course choose whatever color you like best. Okay, having all the base coats done, we can move on to the wash stage now. The red bats quickly get covered in a red tinted wash, and for the purple ones we can use a black wash, to really knock back their bright appearance. After the bats are covered, we use the black wash for the stone pillars, and a brown wash for the sandstone pillars, for which I probably should have waited a little longer. Now we leave them plenty of time to dry, before moving on to dry brushing the most raised parts of their wings, catching the many folds in their membrane, as well as the fur. For this, we use a rosy beige on the red bats, and a light grey for the wings of the purple bats. For the next step, I mixed red and yellow together for a hot orange paint, and with a fine detail brush used it to pick out the arms and fingers of the red bats. As you can see, the bright orange really helps to give the bats more definition, without fighting the other colors for the viewer's attention. We repeat this step on the purple bats using the same light grey we used for the dry brush. Take your time and don't try to rush it, as this step will be the most time consuming in the speed paint either way, but I think the end result is absolutely worth the extra effort. Alright, the small bats are finished, so now we can turn our attention to the dire bats, for which I used the Shadow Queen herself as my muse. Starting with a medium dark grey for the base coat, I want them to stand out with the rest of the swarm, as they are like champions, much bigger and stronger than their fellow specimen. But for now, they look nothing like a champion, so we gotta change that. Taking a Bordeaux Red and using a fine detail brush, we roughly trace the arms and fingers. We want the red to mostly settle in the recesses between the muscles and the membrane on both sides of the wing. After these streaks are applied, we take the red tinted wash from earlier again and cover the same areas. This time we actually want to cover a portion of the fin membrane, but still leave the grey in the middle untouched. To get a good cover, we have to repeat this step quite often, which is why it can take quite a bit of time. Leave enough time for the wash to thoroughly dry before applying the next layer, as you will otherwise tear the formerly painted layers. Once we achieve a nice dark red that gets more intense to the arms and fades out towards the wings, we can move on to the dry brushing. Using a light blue tinted grey and a big brush, we quickly dry brush the whole mini, to catch all of its features and finely cast the details like the folds on their wings, and especially their faces. Having all the bats done, we can quickly dry brush the ruined pillars, using the same light blue for the stone, and a light beige for the sandstone pillars. Now we just have to take care of the bases like we usually do, and finish the speed paint by painting the trims in a smooth pitch black. As with the reds from last time, I took one swarm out in the beginning and painted it while having a timer running. The initial steps themselves are done rather quickly, and it will take you something around 15 to 20 minutes to get your bats to look like this. However, I measured the time for the extra accentuation separately, which will take you around 15 to 20 minutes extra to do. Still, I think that if you have the time, the result will be worth the extra effort. And there we go! All bats are painted in a unique and I think very interesting way. We've got a dark purple swarm and also a unusually warm red swarm, looking more like little fire dragons than dire bats. Speaking of, I also really like how the actual dire bats came out, and I think it's definitely clear that they are a whole different breed. As always, I will now spend the next few minutes to show you guys some extra steps on how to further upgrade these already awesome looking miniatures. Starting with the bat swarms, take a light rosy beige again and quickly dry brush the most raised parts of their wings with it. This will make the impression of the membrane being thinner at that point. Another detail to pick out are the little talons on the bigger bats, for which I used a pitch black. To give the minis more depth and definition, we mix a few drops of black into our original base coating paint and carefully trace the creases of their wings, very similar to what we did with the red wash on the dire bats. Take your time with this and try to avoid the arms and fingers as best you can. To make the dire bats look even more interesting, even more badass if you know what I mean, we take a blue tinted dark grey and paint the main body with it, including the arms and fingers of the wings. I applied this step only to one dire bat, as I thought the red arms looked very cool too, and it's totally up to you what you want your bats to look like in the end. Anyway, after the new base coat we can take another lighter blue tinted grey and carefully catch all of the raised details to really define its features again. After that, we pick a light grey and quickly dry brush the raised membranes of their wings, much like we did with the other bats. While we are at it, we also lightly dry brush the back and front of its main body. For the talons, we start off with a pale brown, and then paint the tip in streaks of very bright beige. Okay, nice! Now we can use the same beige for its teeth and a bright red for its tongue. For the eyes of every bat, I used a very bright yellow this time, as I feared that the red might not stand out enough, especially on the fully red ones. Having the bats finished, we can take care of their accessories, starting with the ruined pillars. When we highlight them, we only want to pronounce their most prominent parts, and also just trace the outward facing edges as well as the underside of the rectangles. For the candles, I used a slightly yellow tinted wash, but a brown wash would also do just fine. After that, we pick out the dripping wax with the same white as we used for the base coat, and finish them up by painting their wigs in a dark grey. Last but not least, I decided to quickly throw some vegetation onto the base, before calling this paint job officially done. I think apart from the zombies, these bats had the most variety going on so far. We've got 2 different swarms as well as 2 different dire bats, but I think they all look awesome. They are quite bright as well, and I guess I just really wanted to move as far away from their pitch black base coats as possible. If you're following me along on this project with your own miniatures at home, you will have 34 of the 60 Curse City models finished by now. More than half of the entire box set. As always, I have a detailed guide written down in the description of the video, listing the exact paints that I use for this paint job. If you have any questions, maybe a couple of suggestions, be my guest and share them in the comment section. Whew, I think we could all really use a break from these batches of minis, so we will paint the mighty Vargskyr in the next episode of our speed painting series. And if you would like to catch his paint job, as well as the other upcoming Cursed City miniatures, feel free to hit the subscribe button. As I am hoping very much to see you again in my next video. Until then, take care.